Da, da, da. I really need to get music. I will find music someday. Ah, but it's always a someday. Oh, where am I? Oh. Oh. So, didn't mean to go to the scene. Because, we're doing Sherlock Holmes tonight. So let me go ahead and get back out here. Alright, there we go. Anyway. Yeah. Turn off studio mode because I keep forgetting that I'm doing scene transitions. Forgetting them altogether. So, hi, how you doing? Goodish. It's freaking cold outside. It snowed early today. Now it's just, cold and snow everywhere. We're a little early. I'm actually going to push some ads real quick. Just for, the sake of saying, hey, look, I can run ads. If I know how. Yep, let's do a minute of ads real quick, because I'm curious. Peek in my other window, see what the hell's going on. Not on the other window. Hello? I'm always curious to see what ads they put on me. Oh, cool. They gave me training exercise one. Cool. Very weird, but cool. Come on, center partner push. Get her in the background. Because, Neko Mom deserves to get partner too. Cats! Sorry about that. Had a cat fight behind me. Okay. Wasn't even sure if I had my audio yet. Craziness. Okay. Let me check. First one. Okay, first one of ads is done. Let me. Oh, let me do another one. It's crazy. Cool. Wow. Guess I could. Ouch. Make that a redeem. Just play ads. No one really wants to watch ads. Would say you can always do the. What is it? Twitch Plus or whatever the hell it is. It's the essentially the cost of 2 subscriptions, but you get all the commercials cut, and you can tell which ones you want gummy access to. Sorry, I keep calling them gummies on Twitch. The remotes on my chat server, they were gummies. I've always known the little icons as gummies. I'm old school chat room server owner, that kind of thing. But yeah. Watch my bitrate fluctuate. That's cool. I've never really used the stream manager on Twitch, so kind of interesting to see what's going on. Like it says, hey, I've got 3 subs right now. That's cool. I have 224 followers. that stuff's not really important. Ouch. But hey, we are doing more Sherlock Holmes tonight. That's the Deerstalker. That's many people don't know the name of the hat is. It is a Deerstalker cap. And it is for hunting, and essentially it helps cover your ears. If you untie the top flap and let it come down, you can tie it on your chin, and helps keep your head warm. The old Deerstalkers like this one are just regular tweed or felt or wool. Uh, they do have fur-covered ones now, which I've got a couple of those for when I do go hunting because, well, I like to keep my ears warm. The only downside about it is the deadened sound, but you gotta take what you can. Yeah. But we are doing Sherlock Holmes tonight. In fact, the first story is going to be The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle. I might do 2 stories. I might try to see if I can squeeze in a third one. That depends on how long the stories are. Let's see. Blue Carbuncle. It's 30-page. Nope. It is 24 pages. The Adventure of the Speckled Band. The Speckled Band is 32 pages. That's 32. 221 minus 189. Yeah, 32. The wolf can math. We're not as good as rabbits multiplying, but hey, we can do math. Oh, cool. I had a love disc. That never got an announcement that it was there. Cold weather and runny noses. Yeah. I do have a lot of water to hydrate with, so. But we're going to try to at least get the Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle and the Adventure of the Speckled Band. Speckled Band is like one of the first Sherlock Holmes one I read. Might try to do the Engineer's Thumb. It's only 26 pages, but it depends on how long we go. And how bad my vision gets after a while. And I did turn off the anecdotes and the toasts. Maybe try to do those just on gaming streams. That way I can do, pauses to read on those. And I really do need to do another controller test through my PS4 remote. If people want to donate money, I'll buy Ghostbusters. The new one. If not, I'll just play the old one. Hold on. Man. At least I'm not coughing. And I hopefully didn't just curse myself for that. Okay. Storybot, what have you not announced that I'm streaming? Stream elements. Elements of the stream. Where are you? Is it weird that I want to try to make another model? uh, Why hasn't Stream Elements announced my ever-loving presence in the world? I have to broadcast myself. Yeah, I can't believe I ranted about Skyrim. Why are they making a news article about, oh, when you take all the ingredients you can pass out? Oh, no shit, kids. Okay, I'm going to have to advertise myself. Oh. Kind of wish I could do this on my tower instead of my laptop. And I could, but I don't have to go through the process of setting up. Okay. Firestream Elements is a mod. No, I don't want to switch to mod view. Bloody hell. That's just annoying. And we're 10 minutes in. Ah. Ouch. Oh. I mean, this sound's working. I'm going to try this one first. Where is it? This one. Please let me hear myself. Sound elements. Ah. Is this because of the update? Inquiring minds need to know. Yeah, that's what I'm. Sound alerts has been killing me lately. It's like when it does play, it like cuts off. And now it doesn't even want to play at all. It's gonna take its ball and go home. Let's see, the points one isn't working. I don't know if the regular one's working. Nope, the regular one's not working either. Well, see, that's what it does. It goes and cuts off. And I cannot figure out why it is doing that. Oh, great. Now they're adding video alerts. I want the sound alerts to work first. Come on, damn it. Everything's on here. Everything was set up. Yada. I swear I want to give someone manager access to see if they can figure out what's going on with it. But my custom sounds aren't working. The regular ones aren't working. And they haven't worked for over a month now. And I've done everything I can think of to fix it. And nothing I've done has done anything to it at all. And I just cannot get anything to work right. And scuff is one thing, but the system's not working at all. Oh, just like Stream Elements is just now broadcasting I'm on. 16 minutes in. 16 minutes in, and it finally broadcasted I'm on. It's just infuriating. At least it put the right message up. Sherlock Holmes in the case of Twitch not working. But anyway, let's switch over to the screen because I can. And it is well past time for me to have started reading already.
Begin in the Great Hall and the Room of Requirement.
And why am I not in my chair?
Then explore beyond the castle walls, in the Forbidden Forest and Hogsmeade.
Oh, scuff is one thing, but
your legacy begins
completes
now. Hogwarts Legacy.
Botchery is something else entirely. And why does it sound like something else is? Because of an ad running. Oh, freaking background music. Give me a fireplace. Okay. I think I'm ready to actually start reading. Hopefully. I need to check one more thing because clearly I am not in my right mind, not in my left mind. But I need to try something else with a command real quick. Oh, look, a spam bot. How lovely. First time chatter, too. Well, that's nice to know. I was about to hit gift a sub on accident. No. Doge hype. And goodbye. Weekend director? Oh, come on. How was it? Oh, yeah. I was doing stuff and such. Check commands. is it? That's not the one I want. Da, 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 da. Oh. Hey, guilty. See if this works. Cool. Now you have points. To 13 users. Okay. Well, I guess it is. Anyway, guess I'll get into the book. Because, you know, that's what we're here for, right? Stories. Anyway, I must get into my proper Dr. Watson voice. Honestly, I think my voice sounds better than it does recorded. But anyway, I'm glad you're here, Nolan. Our first adventure, the adventure of the Blue Carbuncle. I had called upon my friend Sherlock Holmes upon the second morning after Christmas, with the intention of wishing him the compliments of the season. He was lounging upon a sofa in a purple dressing-gown, with a pipe rack within his reach upon the right and a pile of crumpled newspapers, evidently newly studied, near his right. Beside the couch was a wooden chair, and the angle of the back hung a very seedy and disreputable hard felt hat, much the worse for wear, and cracked in several places. A lens and a forceps lying upon a seat of the chair suggested that the hat had been suspended in that manner for the purpose of examination. "You're not engaged," said I. "Perhaps I interrupt you." "Not at all. I am glad to have a friend with whom I can discuss my results. The matter is perfectly a trivial one." He jerked his thumb in the direction of the old hat. "But there are points in connection with which I cannot entirely devoid of interest and even of instruction." I seated myself upon this armchair and warmed my hands before the crackling fire, for a sharp frost had set in, and the windows were thick with ice crystals. "I suppose," I remarked, "that homely as it looks, the thing has some deadly story linked to it. That it is the clue which will guide you to the solution of some mystery and the punishment of some crime." No, no crime," said Sherlock Holmes, laughing. "Only one of the whimsical little incidents which will happen when you have 4 million human beings jostling each other within the space of a few square miles. Amid the action and reaction of so dense a swarm of humanity, every possible combination of events may be expected to take place, and many of the little problems will be presented which may be striking and bizarre without being criminal. We have already had experiences of such." "So much so," I remarked, Of the last 6 cases which I have added to my notes, 3 have been entirely free of any legal crime. Precisely. You allude to my attempt to recover the Irene Adler papers, to the singular case of Miss Mary Sutherland, and to the adventure of the man with his twisted lip. Well, I have no doubt that this small matter will fall to the same innocent category. You know Patterson, the commissionaire? Yes? It is to him that this trophy belongs. Is this his hat? No, he found it. The owner is unknown. I beg that you will look upon it, not a battered billycock, but an intellectual problem. And first, how to know it came to here. It arrived on Christmas morning in the company of a good fat goose, which is, I have no doubt, roasting at this moment in front of Peterson's fire. The facts are these. About 4 o'clock on Christmas morning, Peterson, who, as you know, is a very honest fellow, was returning from a small jollification, and was making his way homeward through Tottenham Court Road. In front of him he saw, in the gaslight, a tallish man walking with a slight stagger and carrying a white goose slung over his shoulder. As he reached the corner of Gold Street, a row broke out between the stranger and a little knot of rows. One of the latter knocked off the man's hat, on which he raised his stick to defend himself, and swinging it over his head, smashed the top window behind him. Peterson had rushed forward to protect the stranger from the assailants, but the man, shocked at having broken a window and seeing an official-looking person in uniform rushing towards him, dropped his goose, took onto his heels, and vanished amid the labyrinth of small streets which lie at the back of Tottenham Court Road. The roughs had also fled at the appearance of Peterson, so that he was left in possession of the field of battle, and also of the spoils of victory in the shape of this battered hat and a most unimpeachable Christmas goose, which surely he restored to the owner. My dear fellow, there lies the problem. It is true that for Mrs. Henry Baker was printed upon the small card which was tied to the bird's left leg. It is also true that the initials HB are legible upon the lining of his hat. But there are some thousands of Bakers and some hundreds of Henry Bakers in this city of ours. It is not easy to restore lost property to any one of them. What did Peterson do? He brought both round, the hat and the goose, to me on Christmas morning, knowing that even the smallest problems are of interest to me. The goose we retained until this morning, when there were signs that, in spite of the slight frost, it would be well that it should be eaten without unnecessary delay. Its finder has carried it off, therefore, to fulfill the ultimate destiny of the goose, while I continue to retain the hat for the unknown gentleman who lost his Christmas dinner. Did he not advertise? No. Then what clue could you have to his identity? Only as much as we can deduce. From the hat? Precisely. But you're joking. What can you gather from this old battered felt? Here is my lens. You know my methods. What can you gather from the individuality of the man who has worn this article? I took the tattered object in my hands and turned it over carefully. It was a very ordinary black hat of the usual round shape, hard and much worse to wear. The lining had been a red silk, but it was a good deal discolored. There was no maker's name, but as the Holmes had remarked, the initials H.B. were scrawled upon one side. It was pierced in the brim with a hat secure, but the elastic was missing. For the rest, it was cracked, exceedingly dusty, and spotted in several places, although there seemed to have been some attempt to hide the discolored patches by smearing the hat with ink. I see nothing, I said, handing it back to my friend. On the contrary, Watson, you see everything. You fail, however, to reason from what you see. You are too timid in your drawing of references. "Then pray tell me what it is that you infer from this hat." He picked it up and gazed at it in a particular perspective fashion, which was characteristic of him. "It is perhaps less suggestive than it might have been," he remarked, "and yet there are a few instances which are very distinct, and a few others which represent at least a strong balance of probability. That the man was highly intellectual is of course obvious upon the face of it, and also that he is fairly well-to-do within the last 3 years, although he has now fallen upon evil days. He had foresight, but he has less than that formerly, pointing to a moral retrogression, which, when taken with the decline of his fortunes, seems to indicate some ill influences, probably drink, at work upon him. This may account to the obvious fact that his wife ceased to love him." Wow. "My dear Holmes!" "He has, however, retained some degree of self-respect," he continued, disregarding my taunts. "Here's a man who leads a sedentary life, goes out little, is out of training entirely, is middle-aged, has grizzled hair, which he has cut within the last few days, and which he anoints with lime cream. There are the more patient facts which can be deduced from this hat. Also, by the way, that is extremely improbable that he has gas laid on in his house." "You are certainly joking, Holmes." "Not in the least. It is possible that even now, when I give you these results, you are unable to see how they are attained." "I have no doubt that I am very stupid, but I must confess that I am unable to follow you. For example, how did you deduce that this man was intellectual?" For answer, Holmes clasped the hat upon his head. It came right over his forehead and settled upon the bridge of his nose. "It is a question of cubic capacity," he said. "A man with so large a brain must have something in it." "The decline of his fortunes, then?" "This hat is 3 years old. These flat brims curled on the edge came in then. It is a hat of a very best quality. Look at the band of rubbed silk, and the excellent lining. If this man could afford to buy so expensive a hat 3 years ago, and has had no hat since, then he has assuredly gone down in the world." "Oh, that is clear enough, certainly. But how about the foresight and the moral retrogression?" Sherlock Holmes laughed. "Here is the foresight," said he, putting his finger in the little disc and loop of the hat secure. "They are never sold upon hats. This man ordered one. It is a sign of a certain amount of foresight, since he went out of his way to make this precaution elastic, and he has not troubled to replace it. It is obvious that he has less foresight now than he had formerly, which is a different proof of his weakening condition. On the other hand, he has endeavored to conceal some of the stains upon the felt by daubing them with ink, which is a sign that he has not entirely lost his self-respect." "Your reasoning is certainly plausible." "The further point is that he is middle-aged, and this hat is grizzled. That has been recently cut, and he uses lime cream, are all that can be gathered from a close examination of the lower part of the lining. The lens discloses a large number of hair ends, clean cut by the scissors of the barber. They all appear to be adhesive, and there is a distinct odor of lime cream. The dust, you will observe, is not the gritty gray dust of the street, but the fluffy brown dust of the house, showing that it has been hung up indoors most of the time. All the marks of moisture upon the inside are proof positive that the wearer perspired very freely, and could, therefore, hardly be in the best of training." "But his wife, you said that she had ceased to love him." "This hat has not been brushed for weeks. When I see you, my dear Watson, with the week's accumulation of dust upon your hat, And when your wife allows you to go out in such a state, I shall fear that you have been unfortunate enough to lose your wife's affection. But he might be a bachelor. Nay, he has been bringing home the goose in peaceful offering to his wife. Remember the card about the bird's leg. You have an answer for everything. But how on earth did you deduce that the gas was not laid in on his house? One tallow stain, or even two, might come by chance. But when you see no less than 5, I think that there can be little doubt that the individual must be brought into a frequent contact with burning tallow. Walks upstairs at night, probably with his hat on, and a guttering candle in the other. Anyhow, we must now got gallows stains from a gas jet. Are you satisfied? Well, it is very ingenious, I said, laughing. But since, as you said just now, there has been no crime committed, and no harm done save for the loss of a goose, all this seems to be rather a waste of energy. Sherlock Holmes had opened his mouth to reply, when the door flew open, and Peterson, the commissionaire, rushed in the apartment with flushed cheeks and the face of a man who was dazed with astonishment. "The goose, Mr. Holmes! The goose, sir!" he gasped. "Eh? What of it, then? Has it returned to life and flapped away through your kitchen window?" Holmes twisted himself round to the sofa to get a fairer view of the man's excited face. "You see, sir, see what my wife found in his crop." He held out his hand and displayed upon the center of the palm a brilliantly scintillating blue stone. Rather smaller than the bean in size, but of such purity and radiance that it twinkled like an electric point in the dark hollow of his hand. Sherlock Holmes sat up with a whistle. "By Jove, Peterson," he said, "this is a treasure trove indeed. I suppose you know what you have got?" "A diamond, sir, a precious stone. It cuts into glass as though it were putty." "It is more than a precious stone. It is the precious stone." "Not the Countess of Morcair's blue carbuncle!" I ejaculated. "Precisely so. I ought to know its size and shape, seeing that I've read the advertisement about it in the Times every day lately. It is absolutely unique, and its value can only be conjectured by the reward offered of £1,000. Is certainly not within the 20th part of the market price." £1,000? Good Lord of mercy! The commissioner flopped down into the chair and stared in his hand and then to the other. "That is the reward, and I have reason to know that there are sentimental considerations with the background, from which would induce a countess to part with half her fortune if she could but recover the gem." "It was lost, if I remember all right, from the Hotel Cosmopolitan," I remarked. "Precisely so. On December 22nd, just 5 days ago, John Horner, a plumber, was accused of having abstracted it from the lady's jewel case. The evidence against him was so strong that the case had been referred to the assizes. I have some account of the matter there, I believe." He rummaged round his papers, glancing over the dates until he at last smoothed one out, doubled it over, and read it the following paragraph. "Hotel Cosmopolitan, jewel robbery. John Horner, 26, plumber, was brought up upon the charges of having on the 22nd instant abstracted from the jewel case of the Countess of Morcar the valuable gem known as the blue carbuncle. John Ryder, upper attendant at the hotel, gave his evidence to the effect that he had shown Horner up from the dressing room of the Countess of Morcar upon the day of the robbery in order that he might solder a second bar in the grate, which was loose. He had remained with Horner a little time, and then finally been called away. On returning, he found that Horner had disappeared, and that the bureau had been forced open, and that a small morocco casket in which As it afterwards transpired, the Countess was accustomed to keep her jewel. It was lying open upon the dressing table. Ryder instantly gave the alarm, and Horner was arrested the same evening. But the stone could not be found, either upon his person or in his rooms. Catherine Cusack, maid to the Countess, disposed of having heard Ryder's cry of dismay on discovering the robbery, and having rushed into the room where she had found matters as described by the last witness. Inspector Broadstreet, B Division, had given evidence to the arrest of Horner, who struggled frantically and protested his innocence in the strongest of terms. Evidence of the previous conviction of robbery having been given against the prisoner, the magistrate refused to deal summarily with the office, but referred it to the assizes. Horner, who had shown signs of intense emotion during the proceedings, fainted away at the conclusion and was carried out of the court. So much for the police court, said Holmes thoughtfully, tossing aside the paper. The question for us now is to solve the sequence of events leading up to this rifled jewel case on one end of the crop of the goose in the other, and Tottenham Court Road at the other. You see, Watson, our little deductions have suddenly assumed a much more important and less innocent aspect. Hero is the stone. The stone came from the goose, and the goose came from Mr. Henry Baker, a gentleman with a bad hat, and all the other characteristics which I have bored you. You must set ourselves seriously to finding this gentleman and ascertaining what part he has played in this little mystery. To do so, we must try the simplest means, and these lie undoubtedly in the advertisement in all the evening papers. If this fail, I shall have recourse to use other methods. What will you say? Give me a pencil and that slip of paper. Now then. Found at the corner of Goodge Street, a goose and a black felt hat. Mr. Henry Baker can have the same by applying at 6:30 this evening at 221B Baker Street. That is clear and concise. Very, but will we see it? Well, he is sure to keep an eye on the paper, since, to a poor man, the loss was a heavy one. He was clearly so scared by his mischance in breaking the window, and by the approach of Peterson, that he thought nothing of flight. But since then, he must be bitterly regretted the impulse which caused him to drop his bird. Then again, the introduction of his name will cause him to see it, for everyone who knows him will direct his attention to it. Here you are, Peterson. Run down to the advertising agency and have this put in the evening papers. And which, sir? Oh, in the Globe, Star, Pall Mall, St. Evenings, Evening News Standard, Echo, and any of the others that might occur to you. Very well, sir. And the stone? Ah, yes, I shall keep the stone, thank you. And I may say, Peterson, just buy a goose on your way back and leave it with me here, for we must have one to give the gentleman in place of the one which your family is now devouring. When the commissioner had gone, Holmes took up the stone and held it against the light. It's a bonny thing, he said. See how it glints and sparkles. Of course, it is the nucleus and focus of a crime. Every good stone is. They are the devil's pet baits. And the larger and more older jewels of every facet may stand for a bloody deed. This stone is not yet 20 years old. It was found in the banks of the Amoy River in southern China, and is remarkable for having every characteristic of a carbuncle, save for it is blue in shade instead of ruby red. In spite of its youth, it has already a sinister history. There have been 2 murders, a vitriol throwing, a suicide, and several robberies brought about by the sake of a 40-grain weight of crystallized charcoal. Who would think that so pretty a toy would be the purveyor of the gallows and the prison? I'll lock it up in my strongbox and drop a line to the Countess to say we have it. Do you think this man Horner is innocent? I cannot tell. Hey, Sammy. Yeah, sound alerts still aren't working. Sorry. Cannot figure out what's going on with those. Oh, then do you imagine that this other one, Henry Baker, has anything to do with the matter? It is, I think, much more likely that Henry Baker is an absolutely innocent man who had no idea the bird which he was carrying was of considerably more value than if it were made of solid gold. That, however, I shall determine by the very simple test if we have an answer to our advertisement. And you can do nothing until then? Nothing. Oh, in that case, I shall continue my professional round. But I shall come back in the evening at the hour you have mentioned, for I should like to see the solution of this very tangled business. Very glad to see you. I dine at 7. There's a woodcock, I believe. By the way, in view of the recent occurrences, perhaps I might ask Mrs. Hudson to examine its crop. I had been delayed at case, and it had been a little after 6:30 when I found myself at Baker Street once more. As I approached the house, I saw a tall man in a Scotch bonnet with a coat that was buttoned all the way up to his chin, waiting outside in a bright semicircle which was thrown by the fanlight. Just as I arrived at the door, it was opened, and he was shown up together to Holmes's room. "Mr. Henry Baker, I presume?" said he, rising from his armchair and greeting the visitor with an easy air of geniality which he could so readily assume. "Pray take the chair by the fire, Mr. Baker. It is a cold night, and I observe that your circulation is more adept for summer than for winter. Ah, Watson, you've just come at the right time. Is that your hat, Mr. Baker?" "Yes, sir, that is indubitably my hat." He was a large man with rounded shoulders and a massive head, and a broad, intelligent face sloping down to a pointed beard of grizzled brown. A touch of red in the nose and cheeks, and a slight tremor in his extended hand recalled Holmes's surmise of his habits. His rusty black frock coat was buttoned right up to the front, and the collar turned up, and his lank wrists protruding from his sleeves without a sign of cuff or shirt. He spoke in a slow, staccato fashion, choosing his words with care, and gave the impression generally of a man of learning and letters who had an ill usage at the hands of fortune. "We have retained these things for you from some days," said Holmes, "because we expected you to see the advertisement in the giving of your address. I am at a loss to know why you did not advertise." Our visitor gave a rather shameful laugh. "Shillings had not been so plentiful to me as they once were," he remarked. "I had no doubt that the gang of roughs who assaulted me had carried off both the bird and hat. I did not care to spend any money on the hopeless attempt at recovering them." "Very naturally, by the way. About the bird. Were you compelled to eat it?" "To eat it?" Our visitor rose half from his chair in excitement. "Yes, it would have been of no use to anyone had we not done so. But I presume that this is other use on a sideboard, which is about the same weight and height, and perfectly fresh, will answer your purpose equally well." "Oh, certainly, certainly," answered the baker with a sigh of relief. "Of course, we still have the feathers, legs, and crop of your own bird, if you wish." The man burst out with a hearty laugh. "They might be useful to me as relics of my adventure," he said, "but beyond that I can hardly see any use of disjecta my late acquaintance are going to be to me. No, sir, I think that, with your permission, I will confine my attentions to the excellent bird which I perceive upon the sideboard." Sherlock Holmes glanced sharply across at me with a slight shrug of his shoulders. There's your hat, and then there's your bird, he said. By the way, would it bore you to tell me where you got the other one from? I'm somewhat of a local fowl fancier, and I have seldom seen a better grown goose. Certainly, sir, said Baker, who had risen and tucked the newly gained property under his arm. There are a few of us who frequent the Alpha Inn near the museum. Well, we are found in the museum itself during the day, you understand. This is our good host, Windigate by name, instituted a goose club, by which, on consideration of a few pence a week, we are each to receive a bird at Christmas. My pence were duly paid, and the rest is familiar to you. I am much indebted to you, sir, for a Scotch bonnet has fitted better to my ears, nor my gravity. With the comical prosperity of manner, he bowed solemnly to both of us and strode off on his way. So much for Henry Baker, said Holmes as he closed the door behind him. It is quite certain that he knows nothing whatsoever of the matter. Are you hungry, Watson? Not particularly. Then I suggest that we turn our dinner into a supper and follow up on this clue while it is hot. By all means. It was a bitter night, so we drew in our ulcers and wrapped cravats around our throats. Outside, the stars were shining coldly in a cloudless sky, and the breath of the passer-bys blew out into smoke like the many pistol shots. Are they eloquent? Our footfalls rang crisply and loudly as we swung through the doctor's quarters. Walpole Street, Harley Street, and then through Wingmore Street into the Oxford Street. In a quarter of an hour we were at Bloomsbury in the Alpha Inn, which is a small public house at the corner of one of the streets which runs into Holborn. Holmes pushed open the door into the private bar and ordered 2 glasses of beer from the ruddy-faced, white-aproned landlord. Address. Your beer should be excellent if it is as good as your geese, he said. My geese, said the man seemed surprised. Yes, I was speaking only half an hour ago to Mr. Henry Baker, who was a member of your goose club. Ah, yes, I see. But, you see, them's not our geese. Indeed. Whose then? Well, I got 2 dozen from the salesman in Covent Garden. Indeed. I know some of them. Which is it? Breckenridge is his name. Ah, I don't know him. Well, here's to your good health, landlord, and the prosperity of your house. Good night. Now for Mr. Breckenridge, he continued, buttoning up his coat as we came out into the frosty air. Remember, Watson, that though we have so homely a thing as a goose at one end of this chain, we have at the other end a man who certainly gets 7 years penal servitude unless we can establish his innocence. It is possible that we may have a line of investigation which has been missed by the police, and which a singular chance has placed in our hands. Let us follow it out to the bitter end. Faces to the south, then, and quick march. We passed across Holborn, down Endell Street, and through the zigzags of slums of Covent Garden Market. One of the largest stalls bore the name of Breckenridge upon it, and the proprietor, a horsey-looking man with a sharp face and trim side whiskers. He was helping a boy put up his shutters. Good evening. It's a cold night, said Holmes. The salesman nodded and shot a questioning glance at my companion. Sold out, I see. The geese, continued Holmes, pointing at the bare slabs of marble. Let you have 500 tomorrow morning. That's no good. Oh, there's some in the stall with the gas flare. Ah, but I was recommended by you. Who by? By the landlord of the Alpha. Ah, yes, I sent him a couple of dozen. Fine birds they were, too. Now, where did you get them from? To my surprise, the question provoked a burst of anger from the salesman. Now then, mister, he said, with his head cocked and arms akimbo. Arms akimbo, cool. What are you driving at? Let's have it out straight now. It is straight enough. I should like to know who sold you these geese which you supplied to the Alpha. Well then, I shan't tell you, so now. Oh, it is a matter of no importance, but I don't know why you should be so warm over such a trifle. Warm? You'd be as warm, maybe, if you were pestered as I am. When I pay good money for a good article, there should be an end to this business. But it's, where are these geese, and who did you sell the geese to, and what will you take for these geese? One would think that they're the only geese in the world. To hear the fuss that's made over them. Well, I have no connection with any other people who have been making inquiries, said Holmes carefully. If you won't tell me, the bet is off. That is all. But I'm always ready to back my opinion in the matter of fowls, and I have a fiver on it that the bird I ate was country bred. Well, then, you've lost your fiver, for it's town bred, snapped the salesman. It's nothing of the kind. I say it is. I don't believe it. Don't you think I know my own fowls better than I do? You've handled them ever since I was a nipper. I tell you, all those birds that went to the Alpha were town-bred. You'll never persuade me to believe that. Will you bet me, then? It's merely taking your money, for I know I am right. But I'll have a sovereign on with you. Teach you not to be so obstinate. The salesman chuckled grimly. Bring me the books, Bill, he said. The small boy brought a round, thin volume and a great, greasy-backed one, laying them all out together beneath the hanging lamp. Now then, Mr. Cocksure, said the salesman. I thought that I was out of geese, but before I finish, you'll find out that this is still the one left in my shop. You see this little book? Well, that's the list of the folks from whom I buy. Do you see? Well then, here on this page, the country folk and the numbers of the names and the wedge of their accounts in the big ledger. Now then, you see this other page with red ink? Well, that's the list of the town suppliers. Now look at this third name. Just read it out and tell me. Mrs. Oakshott, 117, Brixton Road, 249, read Holmes. Quite so. Now turn that up in the ledger. Holmes turned the page indicated. Here you are. Mrs. Oakshott, 117 Brixton Road, egg and poultry supplier. Now then, what's the last entry? December 22nd, 24 geese at 7 cents 5 dough. Quite so, there you are. And underneath? Sold to Mr. Windigates at the Alpha at 12 cents. What have you to say now? Sherlock Holmes looked deeply chagrined. He drew a sovereign out of his pocket and threw it down on the slab, turning away with the air of a man whose disgust is too deep for words. A few yards off, he stomped under a lamp-post and laughed in a hearty, noiseless fashion which was peculiar of him. When you see a man with whiskers of that cut and the punk and protruding out of his pocket, you can always draw him into a bet, he said. I dare say that as I had put £100 down in front of him, that man would have not given me such a complete information as I was drawing from him the idea that he was doing me in on a wager. Well, Watson, we are, I fancy, nearing the end of our quest, and the only point which remains to be determined is whether we should go on to this Mrs. Oakshott tonight, or whether we should reserve that for tomorrow. It is clear from what the surly fellow said that there are others besides ourselves who are anxious about the matter. And I should... His remarks were suddenly cut off short by a loud hubbub which broke out in the stall which we had just left. Turning round, we saw a little rat-faced fellow standing in the centre of the circle of yellow light which was thrown by the swinging lamp, while Breckenridge, the salesman, framed in the door of a stall, was shaking his fists fiercely at the cringing figure. "I've had enough of you and your geese," he shouted. "I wish you were the devil himself. If you come to pestering me any more about your silly talk, I'll set your dog on you. You bring Mrs. Oshaw here and I'll answer her. What have you to do with it? Did I buy the geese off you?" "No, but one of them was mine, all the same," whined the little man. "Well, then go ask Miss Oshaw for it." "She told me to ask you." "Well, you can ask the King of Prussia, for all I care. I've had enough of it. Get off this." He rushed fiercely forward, and the inquirer flitted away in the darkness. "Ha! This may save us a visit from Brixton Road," whispered Holmes. "Come with me, and we shall see what is made of this fellow." Striding through the scattered knots of people who lounged in the flaring stalls, my companion speedily overtook the little man and touched him upon the shoulder. He sprang around, and I could see in the gaslight the very vestige of colour which had driven from his face. "Who are you? What do you want?" he asked in a quavering voice. "If you will excuse me," said Holmes blatantly, "but I could not help overhearing the questions you put to the salesman just now. I think that I could be of some assistance to you." "You? Who are you? How could you know anything of the matter?" "My name is Sherlock Holmes. It is my business to know what other people don't know." "You can know nothing of this." "Excuse me, I know everything of it. You are endeavouring to trace some geese which were sold by Mrs. Oakshott of Brixton Road to the salesman named Breckenridge, and turned by him to Mr. Windigate of the Alpha, and by him to this club, of which Henry Baker is a member." "Oh, sir, you are the very man I have longed to meet," cried the little fellow with outstretched hands and quivering fingers. "I can hardly explain to you how interested I am in this matter." Sherlock Holmes hailed a four-wheeler which was passing by. "In that case, we had better discuss it in a cosy room rather than this windswept marketplace," said he. "But pray tell me, before we go any further, who is it that I have the pleasure of meeting?" The man hesitated for an instant. "My name is John Robinson," he answered in a sidelong glance. No, the real name," said Holmes sweetly. "It is always awkward doing business with an alias." A flush sprang from the man's white cheeks to the stranger. "Well, then," said he, "my real name is James Ryder." "Precisely so, head attendant at the Hotel Cosmopolitan. Pray step into the cab, and I shall soon be able to tell you everything which with you know." The little man stood glancing from one to the other, was half frightened and half hopeful, as one who was not sure whether he was on the verge of a windfall or a catastrophe. When he stepped into the cab, and in half an hour we were back at the sitting-room of Baker Street, nothing had been said during our drive but the high, thin breathing of our new companion, and the clasping and unclasping of his hands spoke of the nervous tension between them. "Here we are," said Holmes cheerfully as we filed into the room. "The fire looks variable reasonable in this weather. You look cold, Mr. Ryder. Pray take the basket chair. I will just put my slippers before we settle this little matter of yours. Now then, you want to know what became of the goose?" "Yes, sir." "Or rather, I fancy, of the goose. It was one bird, I imagine." In which you are interested. White and the black bar around the tail? Ryder quivered with emotion. Oh, sir, he cried. Can you tell me where it went? It came here. Here? Yes, and the most remarkable bird it proved. I don't wonder that you have taken interest in it. I laid an egg before it was dead. The bonniest, brightest little blue egg that it's never seen. I have it here in my museum. Our visitor staggered to his feet and clutched the mantelpiece with his right hand. Holmes unlocked his trunk box and held up the blue carbuncle, which shone out like a star. With a cold and brilliant, many-pointed radiance, Ryder stood glaring and had a drawn face, uncertain whether to claim it or to disown it. The game's up, Ryder, said Holmes quietly. Hold up, man, or you'll get into the fire. Give an arm and back into the chair, Watson. He's not good-blooded enough to end for a felony of impunity. Give him a dash of brandy. So, now he looks a little more human. What a shrimp it is, to be sure. For a moment he had staggered and nearly fallen, but the brandy brought a tinge of color to his cheeks, and he sat staring with frightened eyes at his accuser. I have almost every link in my hands, and all the proofs I need, so there's little which you need tell me. Still, that little may be cleared up and some of the case complete. You have heard, Ryder, that this blue stone is the Countess of Morcar's? It was Kathleen Cusick who told me of it, he said in a crackling voice. I see. Her ladyship's waiting maid. Well, the temptation of sudden wealth, so easily acquired, was too much for you, as it must have been better men before. But you were not so very scrupulous in the means you used. It seems to me, Ryder, that there is a making of a very petty villain in you. You know that this man, Horner, the plumber, which had been concerned in some matters before, and the suspicion would rest more readily upon him. What did you do then? You made some small job in a lady's room, you and your confidant Cusack, and you managed that he would be the man sent for. Then, when he had left, you rifled the jewelry case, raised the alarm, and had the unfortunate man arrested. You then... Ryder threw himself down suddenly upon the rug and clutched my companion's knees. For God's sake, have mercy! He shrieked. Think of my father, of my mother. It would break their hearts. I never went wrong before. I never will again, I swear it. I'll swear it on a Bible. Oh, don't bring me into court, for Christ's sakes, don't! Get back into your chair, said Holmes sternly. It is very well to cringe and crawl now, but you thought little enough of poor Horner on the dock for a crime in which he knew nothing. Oh, fly, Mr. Holmes. I will leave the country, sir. Then the charge against him will break down. We will talk about that. And now let us hear a true account of the next act. What came to the stone and to the goose, and how came the goose into the open market? Tell us the truth, or there lies your only hope of safety. Ryder pressed his tongue over his parched lips. I will tell you just as it happened, sir, he said. When Horner had been arrested, it seemed to me that it would be best to get away with the stone for once. For I did not know at the moment the police might take it to their heads and search me or the room. There was no place about the hotel where I could be safe. I went out as if on some commission, and made way for my sister's house. She had married a man named Oakshott, and lived in Brixton Road, where she fattened fowls for the market. All the way there, every man I met seemed to be a policeman or a detective. And for all it was a cold night, sweat was pouring down my face before I came to Brixton Road.
My sister asked me what was the matter and why I was so pale, but I told her that I had been upset by the jewel robbery at the hotel. Then I went into the backyard and smoked a pipe and wondered what I could do the best for it. I had a friend once called Maudsley who went to the bad and has just been suffering time in Pentonville. One day he had met me and talked me into the ways of thieves and how they used to get rid of what they stole. I knew that he would be true to me, and so one thing and another made him give his mind to the rights on Kilbourne, where he lived, take me into my confidence. He would show me how to turn the stone into money, but how to get it to him safely, I thought in my agonies I had gone through coming from the hotel. I might at any moment be seized and searched, and there would be the stone in my waistcoat pocket. I was leaning against the wall at the time and looking at the geese, which were waddling around my feet, and suddenly the idea came to my head and showed me how I could beat the best detective that ever lived. My sister had told me some weeks before that I might be able to have the pick of her geese for a Christmas present, and I knew that she was always good at her word. I would take my goose now, and then I would carry my stone to Kilburn. There was a little shed in the yard, and behind it I drove one of the birds, a big, fine one with a barred tail. I caught it, and prying its bill open, I thrust the stone down its throat as far as my fingers could reach. The bird gave a gulp, and I felt the stone pass along its gullet down into its crop. But the creature flapped and struggled and came out to my sister to know what was the matter. So I turned to speak to a little brute, broke loose, and fluttered along the others. "What are you doing with that bird, Jim?" she said. "Well," said I, "you said to give me one for Christmas, and I was feeling which one was the fattest." "Oh," said she, "we've set yours aside for you. Chin's bird, we call it. There's a big white one over yonder, about 26 of them, which makes one for you. One for us, and 2 dozen for the market." "Thank you, Maggie," says I, "but if it is all the same to you, I'd rather have that one that was just handed now." "The other's a good 3 pounds heavier," said she, "and we fattened it expressly for you." "Never mind, I'll have the other, and I'll just take it now," I said. "Ah, just as you like," she said, a little huffed. "Which is it that you want?" "The white one with the barred tail, right in the middle of the flock." Very well. Kill it and take it with yours." "Well, I did what she said, Mr. Holmes, and I carried the bird all the way to Kilburn. I told my pal that I had done, and he was a man with a very easy tell of things. Like, he laughed until he choked, and then we got my knife and opened the goose. My heart turned to water. There was a terrible mistake that occurred. I left the bird and rushed back to my sister's and hurried back to the yard. There was not a bird to be seen there. Where are they all, Maggie?" I cried. "Gone to the dealers, Jim." "Which dealers?" "Breckenridge and Covent Garden." "But there was another with a barred tail," I asked. "The same one as I chose?" "Yeah, Jim, there were 2 bar-tailed ones. I could never tell them apart." Well, then, of course, I saw it all, and I ran off as hard as my feet could carry me to this man, Breckenridge. By the time I got there, the lot was sold at once, and not one would he tell me where they had gone. You heard him yourselves tonight. Well, he was always answering me like that. My sister thinks that I'm gone mad, and sometimes I think that myself. And now I am myself branded thief without ever having touched the wealth for which I sold my character. God help me. God help me. He burst into convulsive sobbings with his face buried in his hands. There was a long silence, broken only by his heavy breathing, and by the measured tapping of Sherlock Holmes's fingertips on the edge of the table. Then my friend rose and opened the door. "Get out," he said. "What, sir? Oh, heaven bless you." "No more words. Get out." And no more words were needed. There was such a rush and a clatter upon the stairs and a bang at the door, and the crisp rattle of running footfalls onto the street. After all, Watson, said Holmes, reaching his hand to his clay pipe, I am not retained by the police to supply their deficiencies. If Horner were in danger, it would be another thing, but this fellow will not appear against him, and the case must collapse. I suppose that I am committing a felony, but it is just possible that I am saving a soul. This fellow will not go wrong again. He is too terribly frightened. Send him to jail now, and you will make him a jailbird for life. Besides, it is a season of forgiveness. Chance has put in our way the most singular and whimsical problem, and its solution and its own reward. If you will have the goods to touch the bell, Doctor, we shall begin another investigation, in which, also, a bird will be chief suspect. Makes you wonder how many cases Sherlock Holmes does without, pay. At least I'll get the reward for turning the sun back in. Oh. Okay. The next story is actually one of the first ones I can actually remember reading. The Adventure of the Speckled Band. On glancing over my notes of the 70-odd cases which I have had during the last 8 years, studying the methods of my friend Sherlock Holmes, I find many tragic, some comic, and a large number merely strange, but none commonplace, for, working as he did rather for the love of the art than for the acquirement of wealth, he refused to associate himself with any investigation which did not tend towards the unusual and even the fantastic. Of all these varied cases, however, I cannot recall any which presented more singular features than that which was associated with the well-known Surrey family of the Rotlets of Stoke Moran. These events in question occurred in the early days of my association with Holmes, when we were sharing rooms as bachelors in Baker Street. It is possible that I might have placed upon the record before, but a promise of secrecy that was made at the time, from which I have only been freed during the last month by the untimely death of the lady to whom the pledge was given. It is perhaps as well that the fact should now come to light, for I have reasons to know that there are widespread rumors as to the death of Dr. Grimsley Roylott, which led to the matter even more terrible than the truth. It was early in April of the year 83 that I woke one morning to find Sherlock Holmes standing, fully dressed by the side of my bed. He was a late riser, as a rule, and as the clock on the mantelpiece showed that it was only 7:15, I blinked up at him in some surprise, perhaps just a little resentment, for I was myself irregular in my habits. "Very sorry to knock you up, Watson," he said, "but it's a common lot this morning. Mrs. Hudson has been knocked up, and she retorted upon me, and I on you." "What is it, then? A fire?" "No, a client. It seems that a young lady has arrived in a considerable state of excitement, which insists upon seeing me. She is waiting now in the sitting room. Now, when young ladies wander about the metropolis at this hour of the morning, they knock sleepy people out of their beds. I presume that it is something very pressing, which they have to communicate. Should it prove to be an interesting case, you would, I am sure, wish to follow it from the onset. I thought, at any rate, that I should call you and give you a chance." My dear fellow, I would not miss it for anything. I had no keener pleasure than following Holmes in his professional investigations, and in admiring the rapid deductions, as swift as intuitions, and yet always founded on a logical basis, which he has unraveled the problem which were submitted to him. I rapidly threw on my clothes and was ready in a few minutes to accompany my friend down to the sitting room. A lady dressed in black and heavily veiled, who had been sitting on the window, rose as we entered. "Good morning, madam," said Holmes cheerfully. "My name is Sherlock Holmes. This is my intimate friend and associate, Dr. Watson, before whom you may speak as freely as before myself. Ha! I am glad to see that Miss Hudson has good sense to light the fire. Pray draw it up, and I shall order you a cup of hot coffee, for I observe that you are shivering." "It's not the cold that makes me shiver," said the woman in a low voice, changing her seat requested. "What then?" "It is fear, Mr. Holmes. It is terror." She raised her veil as she spoke, and we could see that she was indeed in a pitiable state of agitation. Her face was all drawn and grey, with restless, frightened eyes, like those of some hunted animal. Her features and figure were those of a woman of 30, but her hair was shot with premature grey, and her expression was weary and haggard. Sherlock Holmes ran her over with one of his quick, all-comprehensive glances. "You must not fear," he said soothingly, bending forward and patting her forearm. "We shall soon set matters right, I have no doubt. You have come in my train this morning, I see." "You know me, then?" "No, but I observed the second half of the return ticket in the palm of your left glove. You must have started early, and yet you had a good drive in a dog-cart, along heavy roads before you reached the station." The lady gave a violent start and stared in bewilderment at my companion. It happens. "There is no mystery, my dear madam," said he, smiling. "The left arm of your jacket is spattered with mud in no less than 7 places. The marks are perfectly fresh. There is no vehicle save for a dog-cart which throws up mud in that way, and then only when you sit on the left-hand side of the driver." Wow. "Whatever your reason may be, you are perfectly correct," she said. "I started at home before 6, reached Leatherhead at past 20, came in by the first train to Waterloo. Sir, I can stand this strain no longer. I shall go mad if it continues. I have no one to turn to. None, save only one who cares for me, and he, poor fellow, can be of little aid. I've heard that you, Mr. Holmes, I've heard of you from Mr. Tooth, whom you have helped in the hour of sore need. It was from her that I got your address. Oh, sir, do you not think it could help me, and at least throw a little light to the dense darkness that surrounds me? Present, it is only out of my power to reward you of your services, but in a month or 6 weeks I shall be married and have control over my own income, and then at least you shall not find me ungrateful." Holmes turned to his desk and, unlocking it, drew out a small case-book, which he consulted. "Ah, fine thought," said he. "Ah, yes, I recall the case. It was concerned with an opal tiara. I think it was before your time, Watson. I can only say, madam, that I shall be happy to devote the same care to your case as I did to that of your friend. As to reward, my profession is its own reward, but you are at liberty to defray whatever expenses I may be put to it, at the time which suits you. And now I beg you will lay before us everything that may help us in forming an opinion on the matter."
"Alas,"
replied our visitor,
"the very horror of my situation lies in the fact that my fears are so vague, and my suspicions depend so entirely on small points, which might seem trivial to another, that even he to whom all the others I have right to look for help and advice to look upon that I tell him his fancies of a nervous woman. He does not say so, but I can read it from his soothing answers and averted eyes. But I have heard, Mr. Holmes, that you can see deeply into a manifold weakness of a human heart. You may advise me how to walk amid the dangers that encompass me.
I am all attention, madam.
My name is Helen Stoner, and I am living with my stepfather, who is the last survivor of one of the oldest Saxon families in England, the Roycotts of Stoke Moran, on the western border of Surrey.
Holmes nodded his head. Yes, I'm familiar with the name.
The family was, one time, among the richest in England. Their estates extended over the borders into Brookshire in the north, and Hampshire to the west. In the last century, however, 4 successive heirs were destitute and in wasteful disposition, and the family ruin was evidently completed by a gambler in the days of Regency. Nothing was left save for a few acres of ground and 200-year-old house, which is itself crushed under heavy mortgage. The last squire dragged out his existence there, living a horrible life in the aristocratic pauper. But his only son, my stepfather, seeing that he must adapt himself to new conditions, obtained an advance of a relative, which enabled him to take a medical degree and went to Calcutta, where, by his professional skill and his force of character, he established a large practice. In a fit of anger, however, he caused by some robbers, which had been perpetrated in the house. He beat his native butler to death and narrowly escaped with a capital sentence. As it was, he suffered a long term of imprisonment, and afterwards returned to England, a morose and disappointed man. When Dr. Roylott was in India, he married my mother, Mrs. Stoner, a young widow of Major General Stoner, of the Bengal Artillery. My sister Julia and I were twins, and we were the only 2 years old at the time of my mother's remarriage. She had a considerable sum of money, not less than £100 a year, and this was bequeathed to Dr. Roylott entirely because we resided with him, with a provision that a certain annual sum should be allowed to each of us in the event of our marriage. Shortly after I returned to England, my mother died. She was killed 8 years ago in a railway accident near Crewe. Dr. Roylott then abandoned his attempts to establish himself a practice in London and took us to live with him in the old ancestral house at Stoke Moran. The money which my mother left was large enough that all of our wants, and there seemed to be no obstacle to our happiness. But a terrible change came over our stepfather about this time. Instead of making friends and exchanging visits with our neighbours, who had been first overjoyed to see the Roylott in Stoke Manor, back at the end of the family seat, he shut himself up in the house, and seldom came out to indulge in furious quarrels with whoever might cross his path. Violence of temper approached to the mania has a heredity in men in the family, and in my stepfather's case it had, I believe, been intensified by his long residence in the tropics. A series of disgraceful brawls took place, 2 of which ended in police court, until at last he became the terror of the village, and the folks would fly at his approach, for he was a man of immense strength and absolutely uncontrollable in his anger. Last week he hurled the local blacksmith over a parapet into a stream, and it was only by paying over all the money which I could gather together that I was able to avert another public exposure. He had no friends at all, save for the wandering gypsies, and he would give those vagabonds leave to encamp on the few acres of bramble-covered land which represent the family estate, wandering away with them sometimes weeks on end. He has a passion also for Indian animals, which are sent over to him by the correspondence, And he has the moment a cheetah and a baboon, which wander freely over his grounds and are feared by villagers almost as much as their master. You can assume from what I say that my poor sister Julia and I are of no great pleasure in our lives. No servant would stay with us, and for a long time we did all the work of the house. She was but 30 at the time of her death, and yet her hair was already beginning to whiten, even as mine has.
Your sister is dead, then?
She died 2 years ago, and it is of her death I wish to speak of you. You can understand that, living my life which I have described, we were little likely to see anyone of our own age and position. We likely had, however, an aunt, my mother's maiden sister, Miss Honoria Westfall, who lives near Harrow, and we were occasionally allowed to pay short visits to this lady's house. Julia went there at Christmas 2 years ago, and there met a half-pay major of Marines, to whom she became engaged. My stepfather learned of the engagement when my sister returned and offered no objection to the marriage. But within a fortnight of the day which had been fixed for the wedding, a terrible event occurred, which has deprived me of my only companion.
Sherlock Holmes had been leaning back in his chair with his eyes half closed and his head sunken into his cushion. But he half opened his eyelids now and glanced at his visitor. "Pray be precise to the details," said he.
It is easy for me to do so, for every event of that dreadful time is seared into my memory. The manor house is, as I have already said, very old, and only one wing is now inhabited. The bedrooms in this wing are on the ground floor, and sitting rooms being in the central block of the building. One of these bedrooms, the first, is Dr. Royette's, the second my sister's, and the third my own. There's no communication between them, but they all open out into the same corridor. Do I make myself plain?
Perfectly so.
The window of these 3 rooms open out upon the lawn. That fatal night Dr. Roylott had gone to his room early, though we knew that he had not retired to rest, for my sister was troubled by the smell of strong Indian cigars, which it is his custom to smoke. She left her room, therefore, and came into mine, where she sat for some time chatting about her approaching wedding. At 11 o'clock she rose to leave, but she paused at the door and looked back. "Tell me, Helen," she said, "have you ever heard anyone whistle at the dead of night?" "Never," said I. "I suppose that you couldn't possibly whistle yourself in your sleep." "Certainly not, but why?" "Because during the last few nights I have always, about 3 in the morning, heard a low, clear whistle. I am a light sleeper, and it has wakened me. I cannot tell where it came from. Perhaps from the next room, perhaps from the lawn. I thought that I would just ask you whether you had heard it." "No, I have not. It must be those wretched gypsies on the plantation." "Very likely, and yet, if it were on our lawn, I wonder that you did not hear it also." "But I sleep more heavily than you." "Well, it was no good consequence at any rate." She smiled back at me, closing my door, and a few moments later I heard her turn the key in her lock.
"Indeed," said Holmes. "What is your custom always to lock yourselves in at night?"
"Always."
"And why?"
"I think that I mentioned to you that the doctor kept a cheetah and a baboon. We had no feeling of security unless our doors were locked."
"Quite so. Pray proceed with your statement."
I could not sleep that night. A vague feeling of impending misfortune impressed me. My sister and I, you will recollect, are twins, and you know how subtle the links between 2 souls are when closely allied. was a wild night. The wind was howling outside. The rain was beating and splashing against the windows. Suddenly, amid all the hubbub of the gale, there burst forth the wild scream of a terrified woman. I knew that it was my sister's voice. I sprang from my bed, wrapped a shawl around me, and rushed into the corridor. As I opened my door, I seemed to hear a low whistle, such as my sister described. And a few moments after, a clanging sound, as if a mass of metal had fallen. As I ran down the passage, my sister's door was unlocked and revolved around on its hinges. I stared at it, horror-stricken, not knowing what was about to issue from it. By the light of the corridor lamp, I saw my sister appear at the opening, her face blanched with terror, her hands groping for help, her whole figure swaying to and fro as if she were a drunkard. I ran to her and threw my arms around her, but at the moment her knees seemed to give way and she fell to the ground. She writhed as one who was in terrible pain, and her limbs were all dreadfully convulsed. At first I thought she had not recognized me, but I bent over her and suddenly shrieked into the voice which I shall never forget. "Oh my God, Ellen! It was the band! The speckled band!" There was something else which she would fain have said, as she stabbed with her fingers into the air in the direction of the doctor's room. But a fresh convulsion seized her and choked her words. I rushed out, calling loudly to my stepfather, and whom I met hastened from his room in a dressing gown. When he reached my sister's side, she was unconscious, though he poured brandy down her throat and sent for medical aid to the village. All efforts were in vain, for she sank slowly and died, having recovered her consciousness. Such was a dreadful end of my beloved sister.
"One moment," said Holmes. "Are you sure about this whistle and the metallic sound? Could you hear it?"
That was the country coroner called me that inquiry. It was my strongest impression that I heard it, and yet, among the crash of the gale and the creaking of the old house, I could have possibly been deceived.
"Was your sister dressed?"
No, she was in her nightdress. In her right hand was found the charred stump of a match, and it was left in a matchbox.
Showing that she had struck a light and looked about where the alarm took place. That is important. And what conclusions did the coroner come to?
Investigated the case with great care, for Dr. Royle's conduct had been long notorious in the country, but he was unable to find any satisfactory cause of death. My evidence showed that the door had been fastened upon the inner side, and the windows were blocked in the old-fashioned shutters with iron bars, which were secured every night. The walls were carefully sounded and were shown to be quite solid all around, while the flooring was also thoroughly examined with the same result. The chimney is wide, but is barred from 4 large staples. It is certain, therefore, that my sister was quite alone when she met her end. Besides, there were no marks of any violence upon her.
What about poison?
The doctors examined her, but no success.
What do you think of that unfortunate lady died of, then?
It is my belief that she died of pure fear and nervous shock, though it was that was frightened her. I cannot imagine it.
Were the gypsies on the plantation at the time?
Yes, they're nearly always there, some.
And what did you gather from the illusion of the band, the speckled band?
Sometimes I've thought that it was merely the wild talk of delirium. Sometimes that it may have been referred to some band of people, perhaps these very gypsies on the plantation. I do not know whether the spotted handkerchiefs which many of them wear over their heads might have been suggestive of strange adjectives she used.
Holmes shook his head like a man who is far from being satisfied. "These are very deep waters," he said. "Pray go on with your narrative."
2 years have passed since then, and my life has been, until lately, lonelier than ever. A month ago, however, a dear friend, whom I have known for many years, has done me the honor to ask my hand in marriage. His name is Armitage, Percy Armitage, the second son of Mr. Armitage of Canewater, near Reading. My stepfather has offered no opposition to the match, and we are to be married in the course of the spring. 2 days ago, some repairs were started on the west wing of the building, and my bedroom wall has been pierced, so that I have to move into the chamber in which my sister died. I am to sleep in the very bed in which she slept. Imagine then my throe of terror when last night, when I was awake, thinking over the terrible fate, I suddenly heard the silence of the night, a low whistle which had been heralded of her own death. I sprang up and lit the lamp, but nothing was to be seen in the room. I was too shaken to go back to bed again. However, so I dressed, and as soon as I was daylight, I slipped down and got the dog cart to the Crown Inn, which is opposite, and drove to Leatherhead, from whence I have come to this morning on the very object of seeing you, and asking your advice.
You have done wisely, said my friend, but you have told me all.
Yes, all.
Miss Rillets, you have not. You are screening your stepfather.
Why, what do you mean?
Arthur Holmes pushed back his frill of his black lace, which was fringed in the hand, and lay upon our visitor's knee. 5 little livid spots, the marks upon your fingers and thumb, were printed on the white wrist. You have been cruelly used, said Holmes. The lady colored deeply and covered her injured wrist.
He is a hard man, she said. Perhaps he hardly knows his own strength.
There was a long silence, during which Holmes leaned his chin upon his hands and stared into the crackling fire. This is a very deep business, he said at last. There are 1,000 details which I should desire to know before I decide upon the course of action. Yet we have not a moment to lose. If we are to come to Stoke Manor today, would it be possible for us to see over these rooms without the knowledge of your stepfather?
As it happens, he spoke of coming to town today about the most important business. It is probable that he will be away all day, and that there will be nothing to disturb you. We have a housekeeper now, but she is old and foolish, and I could easily get her out of the way.
Excellent. You are not adverse to this trip, Watson? By no means. Then we shall both come. What are you going to do to yourself?
I have 1 or 2 things which I wish to know that I'm in town, but I shall return by 12 o'clock, as to be there in time for your coming.
And you may expect us this afternoon. I have myself some small business matters to attend. Will you not wait and have breakfast?
No, I must go. My heart is lightened already since you have confided my trouble. I shall look forward to seeing you again this afternoon.
She dropped a thick black veil over her face and glided from the room. What do you think of it all, Watson? Asked Sherlock Holmes, leaning back in his chair. It seems to me that the most dark and sinister business. Dark and sinister enough. Yet, if the lady is correct in saying that the flooring and the walls are sound, and that of the door, window, and chimney are impassable, then her sister must have been undoubtedly alone when she met her mysterious end. What becomes, then, of the nocturnal whistles? And what of that very peculiar words of the dying woman? I cannot think. When you consider the idea of whistles at night, in presence of a band of gypsies who are on no intimate terms with the old doctor, that fact that we have every reason to believe that the doctor has an interest in preventing his stepdaughter's marriage, the dying illusion of a band, and finally, the fact that Miss Helen Stoner heard a metallic clang, which might have been caused by one of the metal bars that secured the shuttering falling back into its place. I think that there is a good ground to think that the mystery may be darkened along those lines. What, then, did the gypsies do? I cannot imagine. I see many objections to such theory. And so do I. It is precisely for the reason that we are going to Stoke-Moran today. I want to see whistles and objects are fatal, or if they're explained away. But what in the name of the devil? The ejaculation had been drawn from my companion by the fact that our door had suddenly dashed open, and a huge man had framed himself in the aperture. The costume was a particular fashion of the professional band of the agricultural, having a black top hat, a long frock coat, a pair of high gaiters, with a hunting crop swinging in his hand. So tall that his head actually brushed the crossway of the door, and his breath seemed to span across it from side to side. A large face, seared with 1,000 wrinkles, burned yellow with the sun, and marked with a very evil passion, was turned from one to the other of us, while his deep-set, bile-shot, and high, thin, noseless face gave him somewhat the resemblance of a fierce old bird of prey. "Which of you is Holmes?" asked this apparition. "My name, sir. But you have an advantage of me," and my companion said quietly. "I am Dr. Grimsley Roylott of Stoke-Moran." "Indeed, doctor," said Holmes blandly. "Pray, take a seat." "I'll do nothing of the kind. My stepdaughter has been here. I've traced her. What has she been saying to you?" Ouch. "It's a little cold for this time of year," said Holmes. "What has she been saying to you?" screamed the old man furiously. "But I've heard that the croakers promise well," continued my companion imperturbably. "Ah, you put me off, do you?" said our new visitor, taking a step forward and shaking his hunting crop. "I know you, you scoundrel. I've heard of you before. You're Holmes, the meddler." "Meddling kids." My friend smiled. "Holmes, a busybody." His smile broadened. "Holmes is Scotland Yard Jack in office." Holmes chuckled heartily. "Your conversation is most entertaining," said he. "When you go out, close the door, for there is a decided draught." "I will go when I've had my say. Don't you dare to meddle in my affairs. I know that Miss Stoner has been here. I traced her. I'm a dangerous man to fall foul of. See here." He stepped swiftly forward and seized the poker and bent it into a curve with his huge brown hands. Ow. "See that you keep yourself out of my grip," he snarled, and hurled the twisted poker into the fireplace as he strode out of the room. "He seems a very amiable person," said Holmes, laughing. "I am not quite so bulky, but if he had remained, I might have shown him that my grip was not much more feeble than his own." As he spoke, he picked up the steel poker and, with a sudden effort, straightened it out again. Wow. Fancying him having the insolence to confound me with the official detective force. This incident gives zest to our investigation, however, and I only trust that our little friend will not suffer her impudence in allowing this brute to trace her. And now, Watson, we shall order breakfast. Afterwards, I shall walk down to the doctor's commons, where I hope to get some data which may help us in this matter. It was nearly 1 o'clock when Holmes returned from his excursion, and held in his hand a sheet of blue paper scrawled over to notes and figures. "I have seen the will of his deceased wife," said he. "To determine its exact meaning, I have been obliged to work out the present prices of the investments in which it is concerned. The total income, which at the time of his wife's death was a little short of £1,011, and is now, through the fall of agricultural prices, not more than £750. Each daughter can claim an income of £250 in case of the marriage. It is evident, therefore, that if both daughters had married, this beauty would have had a mere pittance, while even one of them could cripple him to a very serious extent. My morning's work has not been wasted, since it has been proved that he has very strongest motives for standing in the way of anything short. And now, Watson, this is too serious for dawdling, especially now that the old man is aware of our interesting ourselves in the affairs. If you are ready, we will call a cab and drive to Waterloo. I should very much be obliged if you would slip your revolver into your pockets. And Eiley's number 2 is an excellent argument with a gentleman who can twist steel pokers into knots. And a toothbrush, I think. We are all in need. At Waterloo, we were fortunate in catching the train for Leatherhead, where we hired a trap at a station inn and drove off 4 miles down the lovely Surrey lanes. It was a perfect day, with a bright sun and a few fleecy clouds in the heavens. Trees and the wayside hedges were just throwing out their green shoots, and the air was full of pleasant smell of the moist earth. To me, at least, there was a strange contrast between the sweet promise of the spring and the sinister quest in which we were engaged. My companion sat in the front of the trap, his arms folded, his hat pulled down over his eyes, and his chin sunk upon his breast, buried in the deepest thought. Suddenly, however, he started, tapped me on the shoulder, and pointed out over the meadows. "Look, there," he said. A heavily timbered park stretching the gentle slope, thickening into a grove at the highest point. Amid the branches, there jutted out the grey gables and high roof tree of a very old mansion. "Stoke Moran?" said he. "Yes, sir, that's the house of Dr. Grimsley Roylott," remarked the driver. "There's some building going on there," said Holmes. "That is where we are going." "There's a village," said the driver, pointing out to the cluster of roofs some distance to the left. "But if you want to get to the house, you'll have to find it shorter to get over the stile, and through the footpath over the hills. There it is, where the lady's walking." "And the lady, I fancy, is Miss Stoner," observed Holmes, shading his eyes. "Yes, I think we had better do what you suggest." We got off and paid our fares, and the trap rattled back on its way to Leatherhead. "I thought it was well," said Holmes, as he climbed out of his hole, "that the fellow should think we had come here as architects of some definite business. It may stop his gossip. Good afternoon, Mrs. Stoner. Let us see what we have as good as your word." Our client of the morning was hurried forward to meet us with a face that spoke joy. "I've been waiting so eagerly for you," she cried, shaking hands with us warmly. "All has turned out splendid. Dr. Roylott has gone to town. It is unlikely that he will be back before evening." "We have had the pleasure of making the doctor's acquaintance," said Holmes, and in a few words he sketched out what had occurred. Miss Stoner turned white to the lips as she listened. "Good heavens!" she cried. "He has followed me, then?" "So it appears." "He is so cunning that I never know when I am safe from him. And what will he say when he returns?" "He must guard himself, for he may find that there is someone more cunning than himself upon his track. You must lock yourself up for him tonight. If he is violent, we shall take you away to your aunt's in Harrow. Now, we must make the best use of our time, so kindly take us at once to the rooms which we are to examine." The building was of grey, lichen-blocked stone, with a high central portion and 2 curving wings, like the claws of a crab, thrown out of each side. In one of these wings, the windows were broken and blocked with wooden boards, while the roof was partly caved in, a perfect picture of ruin. The central portion was a little better repair, but the right-hand block was comparatively modern, and the blinds in the windows, with blue smoke curling up from the chimneys, showing that this was where the family resided. Some scaffolding has been erected against the end wall, and the stonework had been broken into, but there were no signs of any workmen at the moment of our visit. Holmes walked slowly up and down the ill-trimmed lawn and examined the deep attention to the outsides of the windows. This, I take it, belongs to the room in which you used to sleep, and the center one is your sister's. And the last remaining building would be Dr. Willard's chamber?
Exactly so, but now I'm sleeping in the middle one.
Pending the alterations, as I understand. By the way, there does not seem to be any pressing need for repairs on the end wall.
There were none. I believe it was an excuse to move me to my room.
Ah, that is suggestive. Now, on the other side of this narrow wing runs a corridor in which these rooms open. There are windows in it, of course?
Yes, but very small ones. It's too narrow for anyone to pass through.
As you both locked your doors at night, your room was very unapproachable from that side. Now, would you have the kindness to go into your room and borrow your shutters? Miss Stoner did so, and Holmes, after a careful examination of the open window, endeavored every way to force the shutter open, but without success. There was no slit through which a knife could be pressed to raise the bar, and then with a lens he tested the hinges, but they were solid iron, built firmly into the massive masonry. Said he, scratching his chin with some perplexity. My theory certainly presents some difficulties, but no one could pass these shutters if they were bolted. Well, we shall see if the inside throws any light upon the matter. A small side door led us into the whitewashed corridor from the 3 bedrooms opened. Holmes refused to enter the 3rd chamber, so we pressed at once into the 2nd, that in which Mrs. Stoner was now sleeping, and in which her sister had met her fate. It was a homely little room, with a low ceiling and gaping fireplace, after the fashion of old country houses. A brown chest of drawers stood in one corner, and a narrow white counterpaned bed on the other, and a dressing table on the left-hand side of the window. These articles, with 2 small wicker-work chairs, made up all the furniture in the room, save for a square of wilted carpet in the center. The boards round the paneling were worn, brown, worm-eaten oak, and so the discolored that they might have dated back to the original building of the house. Holmes drew one of the chairs into the corner and sat silent, while his eyes travelled round and round, up and down, taking in every detail of this apartment. Where does the bell communicate with? He asked at last, pointing to the thick bell rope which hung down near the bed. Tasso lying upon the pillows.
Goes to the housekeeper's room.
It looks nearer than the other things.
Yes, it was only put in a couple of years ago.
Your sister asked for it, I suppose?
No, I've never heard of her using it. We always used to get up and get what we wanted for ourselves.
Indeed. It seemed unnecessary to put so nice a bell pull there. You'll excuse me for a few moments while I satisfy myself as to the floor. He threw himself down upon his face with his lens in his hand, and crawled swiftly backwards and forwards, examining minutely the cracks between the boards, and then he did the same with the woodwork and with the chamber as he panelled. Finally he walked over to the bed and spent some time staring at it, and running his eyes up and down the wall. Finally he took the bell rope in his hand and gave it a brisk tug. "Why, it's a dummy," he said.
Won't it ring?
"No, it's not even attached to a wire. This is very interesting. You can see now how it is fastened to a hook just above the little opening in the ventilator." "How very absurd! I never noticed that before." "Very strange," muttered Holmes, pulling at the rope. "There are 1 or 2 very singular points about this room. For example, what a fool of a builder might do with a ventilator into another room, when, in the same trouble, he might have communicated with the outside air."
That is also quite modern.
Lady. Done about the same time as the bell rope? Sherlock Holmes.
Yes, there were several little changes carried out about that time.
They seem to have been done in the most interesting character. Dummy bell ropes and ventilators which do not ventilate. With your permission, Miss Stone, I shall now carry on our researches in the inner apartments. Dr. Grimsley Roylett's chamber was larger than that of his stepdaughter, but it was plainly furnished. A camp bed, a small wooden shelf full of books, mostly of technical character, an armchair beside the bed, a plain wooden chair against the wall, a round table, and a large square iron safe were the principal things in the eye. Holmes walked slowly around and examined each and all of them with his keenest interest. "What's in there?" he asked, tapping the safe.
My stepfather's business papers.
"Oh, you have seen inside them?"
Only once, some years ago. I remember that it was full of papers.
"There isn't a cat in it, for example."
No, what a strange idea.
"Oh, look at this." He took up a small saucer of milk which stood upon the top of it.
No, we don't keep a cat, but there's a cheetah and a baboon.
Ah, yes, of course. Well, the cheetah is just a big cat, and yet the saucer of milk does not go very far in satisfying its wants, I dare say. There is one point which I should wish to determine. He squatted down at the foot of the wooden chair and examined the seat with all the greatest attention. "Thank you, this is quite settled," he said, rising and putting his lens in his pockets. "Hello, there is something interesting." The object which had caught his attention was a small dog leash hung in the corner of the bed. The lash, however, was curled upon itself and tied that the loop was a whipcord. "What do you make of that, Watson?" "It's common enough lash. I don't know why it should be tied." "That is not quite so common, is it? Ah, me. It's a wicked world, and when a clever man turns his brains to crime, it is the worst of all. I think I have seen enough, Miss Stoner, and with your permission, we shall walk out upon the lawn." I had never seen my friend's face so grim or his brow so dark when it was turned to investigating the scene of this investigation. We had walked several times up and down the lawn, neither Miss Stoner nor myself liking to break upon his thoughts before he roused himself from his reverie. "It is very essential, Miss Stoner," said he, "that you should absolutely follow my advice in every respect."
I shall most certainly do so.
"The matter is too serious for any hesitation. Your life may depend upon your complaints."
I assure you that I'm in your hands.
"In the first place, both my friend and I must spend the night in your room." Both Miss Stoner and I gazed at him in astonishment. "Yes, it must be so. Let me explain. I believe that there is the village inn over there."
Yes, there's the Crown.
"Very good. Your windows would be visible from there."
Certainly.
"You must confine yourself to your room, on pretence of a headache. When your father comes back, then you will hear him retiring at night. You must open the shutters from your window, undo the hasp, and put your lamp there as a signal to us. And then withdraw quietly with everything which you are likely to want in the room and space you occupy. I have no doubt that, in spite of the repairs, you could manage there for once a night."
Oh, yes, easily.
"The rest you will leave in our hands."
But what will you do?
"We shall spend the night in your room, and we shall investigate the cause of the noise which has disturbed you."
I believe, Mr. Holmes, that you've already made up your mind,"
said Miss Stoner, laying her hand upon my companion's sleeve. Perhaps I have.
And for pity's sake, tell me what the cause of my sister's death is.
I should prefer to have clearer proofs before we speak.
You can at least tell me whether you thought it is correct, and if she died from some sudden fright.
No, I do not think so. I think that there was probably something more tangible. Now, Miss Stoner, we must leave you, for if Dr. Rowlett returned and saw us, our journey would be in vain. Goodbye, but be brave, for if you will do as I have told you, you may rest assured that we will soon drive away the dangers that threaten you. Sherlock Holmes and I had no difficulty in engaging a bedroom and a sitting room in the Crown Inn. They were on the upper floor, and from our window we could command a view of the avenue gate and of the inhabited wing of Stoke-Moran Manor House. At dusk we saw Dr. Grimsley Roylott drive past, and his huge form looming up beside the little figure of the lad who drove him. The boy had some slight difficulty in undoing the heavy iron gates, and we heard the hoarse roar from the doctor's voice and saw him fury, which he shook his fist at him. The trap drove on, and a few moments later we saw the sunlight spring up from the trees as the lamp was lit in the sitting rooms. "Do you know, Watson," said Holmes as we sat together in the gathering darkness, "I have some really scruples taking you tonight. There is a distinct element of danger." "Can it be of assistance?" "Your presence might be invaluable." "Then I shall certainly come." "It is very kind of you." "You speak of danger. You have evidently seen more in these rooms than was visible to me." "No, but I fancy that I may be deduced a little more. I imagine that you saw all that I did." "I saw nothing remarkable save for the pull rope, and the purpose that could answer, I confess, is more than I can imagine." "You saw the ventilator too?" "Yes, but I do not think much of it very unusual other than the small opening between two rooms. It was so small that a rat could hardly pass through." "I knew that we should find the ventilator before we came to Stoke Manor." "My dear Holmes." "Oh, yes, I did. You remember that her statement that her sister could smell Dr. Rowland's cigar. Now, of course, that suggested that there must have been a communication between the two rooms. It can only be a small one, or it should have remarked upon the corridor's injury. I introduced the ventilator." "What harm can come of that?" "Well, there's at least a curious coincidence of dates. A ventilator is made, a cord is hung, and a lady who sleeps in the bed dies. Does that not strike you?" "I cannot see any connection." "Did you observe anything very peculiar about the bed?" "No." "It was clamped to the floor. Did you ever see a bed fastened like that before?" "I cannot say that I have." "The lady could not move her bed. It must always be the same relative position to the ventilator, and to the rope, or so we may call it, since it is very clearly not meant for a bell pull." "Holmes," I cried, "I see dimly that you are hinting at. We are just in time to prevent some subtle and horrible crime." "Subtle enough and horrible enough. When a doctor goes wrong, he is the first of criminals. He has the nerve and he has the knowledge. Palmer and Pritchard were among the heads of their profession. This man strikes even deeper. But I think, Watson, that we shall be able to strike deeper still. But we shall have the horrors enough before the night is over. For goodness sake, let us have a quiet pipe and turn our minds to a few hours for something more cheerful." About 9 o'clock, the light among the trees was extinguished, and all was dark in the direction of the manor house. 2 hours passed slowly away, and then suddenly, just at the stroke of 11, a single bright light shone right in the window in front of us. "That's our signal," said Holmes, springing to his feet. It comes from the middle window. As we passed the exchange of words, the landlord explaining that we were having to go out of late to visit to an acquaintance, and that it was possible that we might spend the night there. A moment later, we were out in the dark road, chill wind blowing in our faces, and one yellow twinkling light in front of us, guiding us through the gloom to our somber errand. There was little difficulty in entering the grounds, for the unrepaired breaches gaped in the old park wall. Making our way among the trees, we reached the lawn, crossed it, and were about to enter through the window, when out of the clump of laurel bushes there darted what seemed to be a little hideous, distorted child, who threw itself upon the grass with writhing arms and then ran swiftly across the lawn in darkness. "My God," I whispered, "did you see it?" Holmes was for moments as startled as I was. His hand closed like a vice grip upon my wrist in agitation. And then he broke into a low laugh and put his lips to my ear. "It is a nice household," he murmured. "That was a baboon." I had forgotten the strange pets which the doctor affected. There was a cheetah, too. Perhaps we might find it upon our shoulders at any moment. I confess that I felt easier with the mind. After following Holmes' example and slipping off my shoes, I found myself inside the bedroom. My companion noiselessly closed the shutters and moved the lamp into the table and cast his eyes about the room. All was as we had seen during the daytime. Then creeping up on me and making a trumpet of his hands, he whispered in my ear again, so gently that it was all that I could do to distinguish the words. "The least sound could be fatal to our plans." I nodded to show that I had heard. "We must sit without light. You would see it through the ventilator." I nodded again. "Do not go to sleep, for your very life may depend upon it. Have your pistol ready in case we should need it. I will sit on the side of the bed, and you in that chair." I took my revolver and laid it on the counter of the table. Holmes had brought with him a long, thin cane, and he placed it on the bed beside him. By it he laid a box of matches and a stump of a candle. Then he turned down the lamp, and we were left in darkness. How shall I forget that dreadful vigil? I could not hear a sound, not even the drawing of breath, and yet I knew that my companion sat open-eyed within a few feet of me, in the same state of nervous tension which I found myself. The shutters cut off the least ray of light, and we waited in absolute darkness. From outside came the occasional cry of a night bird, and once the very window a long-drawn cat-like whine, which told us that the cheetah was indeed at liberty. Far away we could hear the deep tones of the parish clock, which boomed out every quarter of an hour. How long they seemed, those quarter hours. 12 struck, and 1, and 2, and 3. And we sat, waiting silently for whatever might befall. Suddenly there was an involuntary gleam of light up at the direction of the ventilator, which vanished immediately, but was succeeded by a strong smell of a burning oil and a heated metal. Someone in the next room had lit a dark lantern. I heard a gentle sound of movement, and then all was silent once more, though the smell grew stronger. For half an hour I sat with straining ears. Then suddenly another sound became audible. A very gentle, soothing sound, like that of a small jet of steam escaping continually from a kettle. The instant that we heard it, Holmes sprang from the bed, struck a match, and lashed furiously with his cane at the bell pull. "You see it, Watson!" he yelled. "You see it!" I saw nothing. At the moment when Holmes struck the light and heard a low, clear whistle, when the sudden glare flashing in my weary eyes made it possible for me to tell what my friend had lashed savagely. I could, however, see that his face was deadly pale and filled with horror and loathing. He had ceased to strike and was gazing up at the ventilator when suddenly there broke from the silence of the night most horrible cry which I ever listened. It swelled up louder and louder. A hoarse yell of pain, anger, and fear mingled with one dreadful shriek. They say that away down in the village, and even the distant parsonage, the cry raised the sleepers from their beds. It struck cold in our hearts, and I stood gazing at Holmes and he at me until the last echoes of it had died away into the silence from which it rose. "What can it mean?" I gasped. "It means that it is all over," answered Holmes. "And perhaps, after all, it is for the best. Take your pistol, and we will enter Dr. Rowlett's room." With a grave face, he lit the lamp and led the way into the corridor. Twice he struck at the chamber door without any reply from within. Then he turned the handle and entered, I at his heels, with the pistol cocked in hand. It was a singular sight which met our eyes. Upon the table stood a dark lantern with a shutter half opened, throwing a brilliant beam of light upon an iron safe. The door, which was ajar. Beside the table on a wooden chair sat Dr. Grimsley Rowlett, clad in a long grey dressing gown, his bare ankles protruding beneath, and his feet thrust into red heelless Turkish slippers. Across his lap lay a short stock with a long lash which we noticed during the day. His chin was cocked upward, and his eyes were fixed in a dreadful rigid stare at the corner of the ceiling. Around his brow he had a peculiar yellow band with brownish speckles, which seemed to be bound tightly about his head. As we entered, we made neither a sound nor a motion. "The band! The speckled band!" answered Holmes. I took a step forward. In an instant the strange headband began to move. Then it reared itself upon its head. The hair sat square-shaped head, and puffed its neck in some loathsome serpent. "It's a swamp adder," cried Holmes, "the deadliest snake in India. He has died within 10 seconds of being bitten. Violence does, in truth, recoil upon violence, and the schemer falls in the pit, which he digs for another. Let us untruth this creature back into its den, and we shall move Miss Stoner to some place of shelter, and let the country police know what has happened." As he spoke, he drew a long whip carefully from the dead man's lap. Throwing the noose around the reptile's neck, he drew it from its horrid perch, and carrying it at arm's length, threw it from the iron safe, which he closed. Such are the rare and true facts of the death of Dr. Grimsley Rowlett of Stoke Moran. It is not necessarily that I should prolong the narrative, which has already run too great a length, by telling you how we broke the news to the terrified girl, and how we conveyed her by the morning train into the care of her aunt at Harrow, or how the slow process of official inquiry came to the conclusion that the doctor met his fate while indiscreetly playing with a dangerous pet. The little which I had yet learned from the case was told by Sherlock Holmes when he travelled back the next day. "I had," he said, "come to the entirely erroneous conclusion which shows, my dear Watson, how dangerous it is to reason from insufficient data. The presence of the gypsies, and the use of the word band, which was used by the poor girl, no doubt to explain the appearance which she caught the hurried glimpse of by the light of her match, were sufficient to put me on the entirely wrong scent. I can claim only the merit that I instantly reconsidered my position when, however, I came to clear whatever danger threatened the occupants of the room did not come from either the window nor the door. My attention was speedily drawn, as I have already remarked to you, to this ventilator, and to the bell rope which hung down to the bed. The discovery of this was a dummy, and that the bed was clamped to the floor, instantly gave me the suspicion that the rope was there as a bridge for something passing through the hole to coming to the bed. The idea of the snake instantly occurred to me, and when I coupled it with my knowledge of the doctor who was furnished with a supply of creatures from India, I felt it was probably on the right track. The idea of using a form of poison which could not possibly be discovered by any chemistry set was just one of which that would occur to be clever and ruthless man who had Eastern training. The rapidity of which such a poison would affect also, from this point, be to an advantage. It would be a sharp-eyed coroner, indeed, who could distinguish two little dark punctures which would show the poison fangs had done their work. And then I thought of the whistle. Of course, he must recall the snake before the morning light, revealing it to its victim. He had it trained it, probably by the use of milk, which we saw, to return to him when summoned. He would put it through the ventilator an hour that he thought best, with the certainty that it would crawl down the rope and land on the bed. It might or might not bite the occupants. Perhaps she might escape every night, but sooner or later she would follow the victim. I'd come to these conclusions before I had ever entered the room. An inspection of the chair showed me that he had been in the habit of standing on it, which is, of course, be necessary to reach the ventilator. The sight of the safe, the saucer of milk, and the loop of whipcord were enough to finally dispel any doubts which may have been remaining. The metallic clang heard by Miss Stoner was obviously caused by her stepfather hastily closing the door of the safe on its terrible occupants. Having once made up his mind, you know the steps which I took in order to put the matter to the proof. I heard this creature hiss, as I've no doubt you did also. With the result of driving it to the ventilator, and also with the result of chasing it to turn upon its master on the other side. Some of the blows of my cane came home and roused its snakish temper, so that it flew upon the first person it saw. In this way, I am no doubt indirectly responsible for Dr. Grimley's Rollid's death, and I cannot say that it is likely to weigh very heavily upon my conscience. Oh. Yep, I definitely remember that one. Ouch. Man. Runny nose. That was so much fun. But Blue Carbuncle and the Speckled Band. Good stories, huh? Now, it's interesting that the stories are published in this particular order, but the actual stories they tell are not in the order that they're told. So, which is probably one of the more interesting things about the Sherlock Holmes stories. But let's see. Well, thank you all for coming in and listening to me muddle through the stories, because I know I was definitely getting tongue-tied quite a few times in there. Oh. It's 10 for 10 would listen to again. Well, that's why I try to separate the stories and have them on my YouTube channel. Let's see. Oh yeah, I really do muddle through a lot of them, especially when I'm trying to do the voices too. But I'm trying to keep Holmes's voice so proper as opposed to Watson, who's definitely more horse-spoken and telling the stories in his own right. But I did not remember her talking so much about her own adventures and everything. Because I really don't do the female voices all that well. Let's see. I'll try to find someone to raid. Anyone have any suggestions?
Let's see. Okay. Just looking over all the people that are on right now and my usual raids. I'm usually not always one of the last readers on, but let's see who is on. Oh, of course, as soon as I'm looking, my entire list shifts. I do try to see if I can find someone who's not yet affiliate, so I can help them out. Okay. I think I found someone. Oh. That hasn't made affiliate yet. They're playing Assassin's Creed Origins, but see how well I can type. But I do have my raid messages, since I actually remembered to make them both. Here. But I do have both the regular and subscriber ones. I don't have any interest in shield mode. But I'm going to raid my copy. Real Kami again. He's playing Assassin's Creed Origins. So let's go ahead and see if we can help him out some. So thank you all for coming in. Thank you for the raid, Drezov. And thank you all for lurking and listening. I will be back on tomorrow night with more fairy tales. Because, that's what Fridays are for. So I will see you all then. Have a good night.